Would you dare ask to see your fate? Late at night, three friends meet a strange man on a near-empty train. He carries nothing but a sketch pad and a warning, one glimpse only. When he draws a portrait of the future that feels too real, curiosity pushes them further. This is a chilling story of premonitions, fortune-telling, and the price of asking to see your fate. Inspired by true fears and told in the immersive Midnight Horror Society style. Tell me, would you look at your future if someone offered to show it? I'm old now. My hands don't steady the way they used to, and sometimes I lose words in the middle of a sentence. But this photograph keeps my memory sharp. It's Jeremiah, taken years after that night, before he too was gone. He gave it to me near the end, his face already lined the way the sketch had once promised, his eyes tired but unbroken. Keep it, he told me. Proof that what we saw wasn't madness. Proof that dark powers still walk among us. I keep it in my jacket, close to my chest. Some men carry family pictures. I carry this. Because the world thinks the dead are only in graves. But I know better. It began with a sound, not voices, not footsteps, just the scratch of a pencil, steady and sure. We were already moving. Late train, last carriage, windows showing nothing but our own reflections, when I heard it from the corner near the exit door. Not frantic scribbling, not idle doodling. This was deliberate, controlled, like a key turning in a lock it had known all its life. I remember blurting out before I meant to, "Tell me that isn't creepy." Ajan looked up from his phone. Jeremiah followed my eyes. That was when we saw him. The man in the gray shawl, a canvas satchel at his boots, a sketch pad balanced on one knee. His eyes were closed, but the pencil in his hand never paused. The carriage seemed colder, though the heaters hissed under our seats. Somewhere down the line, a door thumped shut, the sound traveling through the metal like a warning. Ajan tried to laugh it off. "Relax. He's drawing from memory." But I heard the edge in his voice. Jeremiah didn't answer. His hand went to the pocket Bible he always carried. Not like a weapon, but like someone touching a photograph to remind themselves of who they are. That's when the man with the pencil stopped. Without opening his eyes, he tore the page out in one long, careful pull. He slipped it into a thin envelope, smoothing it flat with his palm like someone tucking a child into bed. Only then did his eyes open. They were pale and wide awake, as though the rest of him had been somewhere else, deeper, while we only rode the train above. He didn't look at us. Not yet. We left the wedding just before midnight. Rain had finished an hour earlier and left every surface damp. The street outside the venue smelled like sweet spilled beer and engine heat. We tried for a taxi. One slowed, sized us up, and rolled on. Ajan swore. Jeremiah laughed under his breath and pointed at the stairs down to the station. The platform felt abandoned in the way stairwells feel after office hours. Clean but lonely. The cleaner with the orange vest had just wheeled a mop bucket into the service room and clicked the door behind her. Two teenagers in hoodies sat sharing a single set of earbuds and didn't look up when we passed. We took the last carriage out of habit. It's quieter there. The doors hissed, and the carriage did that soft, elastic sway that tells you the driver's easing forward to test the rails. The air smelled like disinfectant and old metal. My jacket clicked against the pole as I sat down. We had the place mostly to ourselves. Jeremiah dropped into a seat, smiling like he'd been given a gift. See? We prayed for a ride, and here it is. Whole carriage to ourselves. Some people are watched over. Across from him, Ajan snorted. "It's called off-peak. not divine timing. You're giving math a halo. He was already winding up. He had that lean forward posture that meant he'd already sharpened his arguments. God didn't schedule transit tonight just for you. That was how it always went with us. Jeremiah believed every detail of life carried a reason, a sign, maybe even a warning from God. Ajan believed the world was random, cause and effect, nothing more. I usually sat between them, half agreeing with both, half too tired to argue. I was tired. I wanted the windows to be a movie I didn't have to follow, but the rhythm between them is the kind you can hear even when you try not to. Not everything is random, Jeremiah said, voice soft, but with that steel thread he gets when he's sure. Sometimes what you call coincidence is a hand guiding you, or warning you. Warning? Ajan repeated, like he was tasting the word and found it overcooked. Everything is a warning if you buy a big enough umbrella. You're just dressing chance up in religious clothes. People see what they want to see. Horoscopes, fortune tellers, signs. Oh, it's all theater. Nobody actually knows what's coming. Jeremiah opened his jacket, brought out the pocket Bible, and flipped without looking like he was going somewhere he knew by heart. The lights above us flickered once and steadied. The wheels hummed on. He read, not in a preacher's voice, but like someone reading a text message that mattered. There shall not be found among you anyone who practices divination, or tells fortunes, or interprets omens, or a medium or necromancer, for whoever does these things is an abomination to the Lord. And because of these abominations, the Lord your God is driving them out before you. You shall be blameless before the Lord your God. Deuteronomy 18:10-13. He closed the book with his thumb held inside it. It's not just don't do it, he said quietly. It's don't go there. Some knowledge isn't neutral. Ajan leaned back, folding his arms. So you're telling me superstition is bad because, surprise, your superstition says so? He half smiled. In other words, fortune tellers are frauds, and God is jealous of the competition. That's your point? To me, that's the same box with a different label. Ajan gave a slow clap. Old text, scary words. You know what else is scary? Confirmation bias. People pay to be told what they already fear. I tried to lighten it. Okay, but if a neon sign appears at the next stop that says, Repent, Ajan? I tried to laugh it off, but it didn't really land. The carriage had grown quieter. Even the rattling of the wheels seemed to sink into the background. He smirked, but I saw the muscle jump in his jaw, the one that always twitched when talk turned to faith. I can't blame him. He'd grown up with a lot of rules. I think he was still counting them. Jeremiah didn't reply right away. He just tucked the Bible back into his jacket like it was enough to let the verse sit in the air between us. He wasn't being cruel. He was being Ajan. He doesn't hate belief. He just hates being fooled. You know what the real trick is, Ajan said. People want a story. They'll buy it if it comes with a ritual. Cards, lines on palms, stars, or accept the grace of someone dying so that your sins will be forgiven. The theater of it sells the lie. I should have noticed then. A pair of eyes reflecting in the black glass behind Ajan's shoulder. Not a face, just the glitter of attention where there shouldn't have been any. We weren't alone. I looked past them and saw the shawl in the corner. At the far end of the car, tucked into the corner near the exit door, someone shifted under a charcoal shawl. It wasn't just a blanket. It had that lived-in weight, the kind of cloth that keeps a chill from getting into your bones. I saw the shape of hands, a beard that had gone white in a way that didn't look weak. Beside him rested a canvas satchel with a scuffed leather strap, the kind of bag old men inherit from men who were old before them. When he finally looked our way, he did it like a teacher deciding a class was ready for the next part. No flourish, no smile. He just noticed us noticing him and accepted it. "You were talking about the future," he said. His voice had an old warmth in it. "About whether anyone can know it." We turned. You know how sometimes a stranger's presence rewrites the whole room in a second? That happened. The car felt narrower, colder. "That was him," I said, nodding at Ajan. "He says nobody knows anything." "I said nobody knows the future," Ajan corrected. "Different problem." "You were saying the future can't be known," he said. "You're right to distrust men who play with it. Most of them don't know what they're touching." The man's gaze flicked to the Bible in Jeremiah's hand, and something like respect passed over his face without stopping. "You're not wrong to be careful," he said to Jeremiah. "Most doors stay closed for a reason." That line put a fine crack through the air. Jeremiah waited. He has a way of refusing to climb the ladder someone sets in front of him. He just held the verse between them like a lantern and didn't move. The man nodded, as if Jeremiah had spoken. He set the envelope he'd just filled into his satchel and pulled out a fresh page on the pad. He held the pencil the way careful men hold fragile things. Jeremiah straightened a little, half wary, half curious. "Are you a fortune teller?" "I don't tell fortunes," he said. "I draw only once for any person, and only at the moment they name." He glanced at Ajan. "It isn't a parlor trick. It isn't for sale." "Then why do it?" Ajan asked. The man's eyes went distant, the way car windows go when rain starts. "Because my teacher asked me to bear witness. Because some people demand to see what they've been told not to ask for. Sometimes the mercy is in letting them see it one time and no more. I don't know what it was, his quiet maybe, but I believed he wasn't trying to impress us. He sounded like someone who had been tired for a long time and made peace with it." Ajan gave a short laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "Right? And I'm the king of the moon. You draw with your eyes closed, and people find their grandfathers in the smears." He said it like a joke, but he was leaning forward. "Don't," Jeremiah said softly. Not to Ajan, not to the man, maybe to whatever stood between them. "We just read the warning." The man didn't argue. He did something small instead. With a dull pat of his thumb, he pressed a tiny cross into the top margin of the fresh page. A private habit, a muscle memory, not meant to be seen. Then he faced us without moving closer, as if the distance itself was a kind of respect. "The rule is simple," he said. "You name a date and an hour." I close my eyes. If the image comes, I draw. If it doesn't, I don't. No second tries, no revisions. Not ever. He said not ever, like a person who had buried someone and learned the meaning of final. The carriage rolled onto a bridge then, steel repeating under us with that hollow drum you feel in your feet. The water outside showed us back to ourselves in broken pieces. Somewhere up the chain, a panel light flickered and stayed fixed, just a hair dimmer than it had been a moment ago. Ajan looked at me and then at Jeremiah, as if daring one of us to say what he was about to. "And if no image comes?" The man looked at his hands before he answered. "Then the moment you asked for is a place your face will not appear." He could have said it to be dramatic. He didn't. He said it like someone telling you the weather report before a long drive. Jeremiah's fingers tightened around the Bible's soft leather. "We're not supposed to touch this," he said to me, not to either of them. "That's what the verse is for." Ajan smiled. "Not kind, not cruel, mostly hungry. Or we could test a liar and sleep better." He stood up halfway, then thought better of it and sat again. The lights hummed. The pencil waited. I could feel the shape of what was coming the way you feel pressure before thunder. Not the noise itself, just the weight. "Your teacher?" I asked, because I needed one normal question to put my feet on. "Was he an artist?" The man considered that for a breath. "He knew how to hold his silence," he said. "That's rarer." We passed the mid-river marker. The carriage shivered as wind tunneled along the steel. The man looked down at the paper he hadn't touched yet, and back up at us. The three strangers he'd somehow been waiting for without knowing it. "Choose," he said. No one moved. Jeremiah stared at the floor, lips pressed tight like he was holding words in his mouth to keep them from escaping. Ajan's eyes gleamed the way they do when he's about to win an argument he invented. I felt my heart tap the inside of my ribs like it needed out. The train rolled on, and somewhere in that noise I knew we were already past the point where we could get off. For a long time, none of us spoke. The train carried the silence for us, the steady hum of wheels on track, the faint squeal when the weight shifted, the occasional shake that made the overhead lights blink like they were thinking of dying. The old man sat still, pencil balanced loosely between his fingers, the fresh white page waiting. His eyes were on us, but not pressing. It was as if he already knew one of us would break the silence for him. Of course it was Jeremiah. He cleared his throat softly, as though even that felt like crossing a line. "You said one drawing only, for each person?" The man nodded once. One glimpse, one face, at one point in time. Never again. "And why?" Jeremiah asked, not with challenge, but with that low seriousness he had when he quoted scripture. "Why only once?" "Because the gift is not mine to spend," the man said. "It is borrowed. My teacher told me, do not ask twice. The second time is theft." That phrase, "the second time is theft," made the air feel thinner in my chest. Jeremiah turned to me, maybe hoping I'd step in, but Ajan had already leaned forward, his eyes bright with a kind of reckless excitement. "Then show us. Prove it. If it's real, I want to see what you think is waiting for me." Jeremiah's hand shot out, gripping Ajan's wrist. "Don't," he said sharply. "Don't play with this." "It's not play," Ajan snapped back. "It's exposure. If he's a fraud, we see it. If he's not," he smirked, "then you get your sermon in living color." Jeremiah's jaw tightened. He opened his mouth, then shut it again. I could see the verse still working in him, the one he'd read only minutes ago. "There shall not be found among you." But his faith and his fear were pulling in two different directions. Finally, he exhaled and looked back at the old man. "If anyone should go first, it's me." Ajan's smile faltered. "What?" Jeremiah squared his shoulders, as though he had made peace with something. "If it's false, I'll call it. If it's true, better me than either of you." The man regarded him steadily, like he'd been expecting exactly that. He slid the pad forward and tapped the blank page. "Right. A day, a year, an hour if you wish, a moment you want to see." Jeremiah hesitated, then uncapped the pen from his jacket pocket. His handwriting was neat, almost boyish in its care. He wrote, 28th August 2065, 9:15 p.m. He didn't explain why. He simply set the pad back on the man's knee, folded his hands together, and waited. The old man gave a small nod. He touched the pencil to the top of the page and let his eyelids fall shut. The transformation was immediate. His breathing slowed. His hand, which had seemed frail a moment before, became steady as stone. And then the pencil began to move. The sound of it was the worst part. Soft, dry strokes. The graphite whispering across the page like something alive. His eyes stayed closed, but the lines came fast. Sure, purposeful. He wasn't sketching blindly. He was remembering. We leaned forward without meaning to. The train itself seemed quieter, as if even the wheels were waiting. It took less than a minute. He opened his eyes, lifted the pencil, and turned the pad toward Jeremiah. We froze. On the paper was an old man's face. Wrinkles folded deep into his skin, glasses thick enough to magnify weary eyes, hair gone thin to nothing. But it wasn't just any old man. It was Jeremiah, aged, softened, unmistakably him. Jeremiah inhaled sharply, covering his mouth with his hand. It looks like... His voice shook. It looks like my grandfather. And when he was in his 70s, people always said I'd grow into his face. I glanced at Ajan, expecting a smug retort, but for once his smirk didn't come quickly. His eyes narrowed instead, studying the drawing with suspicion. Coincidence, he muttered finally. Old man draws another old man, and you project what you want to see. Jeremiah pressed the sketch to his chest like it might slip away. He didn't argue. He just sat there, staring at it as if some part of him had been both comforted and unsettled at once. That's when the man tore the page carefully from the pad and slid it toward Jeremiah. Yours, he said softly. One glimpse only. Keep it or burn it. The choice is yours. The carriage rocked as we passed onto another stretch of track. The windows trembled, showing our reflections fractured by streaks of rainwater. And in those shifting panes of glass, I thought for a moment I saw another reflection, one that didn't belong to any of us, a pale outline leaning closer than it should. I blinked, and it was gone. The old man closed the pad, folded his hands over it, and looked back at us. His eyes lingered on Ajan this time. Would you like to see? The words weren't forceful. They weren't even inviting. They just hung there, like a door cracked open in a dark hallway. Ajan's grin returned, sharp and reckless. Yeah, he said, draw me. Let's see if your one-trick pencil can handle a skeptic. Ajan leaned forward, his grin wide but his eyes sharp. All right, old man. My turn. Draw me. Let's see if your gift can handle someone who doesn't buy into it. The stranger's hands stayed folded on top of the pad. He didn't move. His expression was unreadable, neither offended nor eager. Just still. You're certain? He asked quietly. Ajan snorted. Of course. What, do I need a waiver? Just hand me the page. Jeremiah shifted uneasily beside me, clutching the sketch of his older self against his chest. His knuckles were pale. Ajan, he said in a low voice, don't mock this. You saw what he just did. Even if you think it's coincidence, don't tempt it. Ajan turned to him, smiling like someone about to win a bet. That's exactly what I'm doing, Jeremiah. Testing it. If it's real, fine, I'll eat my words. If it's a scam, then you get to stop worrying. Either way, I prove something. He snatched the pen and pad from the old man's lap, scribbling fast. His letters were jagged, almost aggressive. 28th of June, 2025, 11 p.m. He slid the pad back and tapped the page with his finger. 15 minutes from now. Draw me. Right here, tonight. No wiggle room, no decades from now when we can't prove it. Immediate results. I felt my stomach tighten. The carriage clock above the door read 10:45. The old man looked at the page, then at Ajan. He exhaled through his nose like someone bracing for a weight he didn't want to lift. You don't understand what you're asking. Sure I do, Ajan shot back. Either you can draw me at 11 or you can't. That's testable. The man closed his eyes slowly, like he was in pain. It isn't about testable. It's about whether your face exists in that moment. That phrasing sent a shiver through me. Jeremiah whispered almost to himself, "If the page stays blank." The old man finally touched pencil to paper. He held it there for a long time, not moving, not even trembling. His eyelids fluttered, and his lips moved as though he were muttering a prayer or a warning he didn't want us to hear. Nothing appeared. The pencil didn't move. 30 seconds passed. The train rattled over a junction, the lights flickering overhead. Still nothing. Finally, the old man lifted the pencil, opened his eyes, and looked at Ajan. His face was pale in the sickly carriage light. "There is no drawing," he said softly. "No image of you appears." Ajan's grin froze. His laugh came out brittle. "So what? I don't exist? I vanish in the next 15 minutes? Oh, that's convenient. You can't fake me decades from now, so you fake me out of existence instead." The old man didn't argue. He closed the pad with deliberate care and set it back into his satchel. "I told you, one glimpse only. If the moment you choose is not yours to see, then the page remains blank." My heart hammered in my throat. I couldn't stop looking at the clock above the door. 10:47. Jeremiah whispered fiercely. "Ajan, stop this. It's not a game. You heard the verse. I told you this is forbidden for a reason." Ajan slammed a hand on the seat rail, startling both of us. His face had gone red, his bravado slipping into something more defensive. "No, I won't stop. This is how charlatans win, by hiding behind rules. If one drawing fails, they make excuses." He leaned toward the old man, his voice sharp. "Do it again. Different time. 5 years from now. 10. Anything. Draw me again." The man shook his head, sorrow heavy in the motion. "It cannot be done. Not twice. Not for you. Not for anyone." Ajan's eyes blazed. He half rose from his seat, looming over the shawled figure. "Then admit it. Admit you're a fraud." The old man didn't flinch. He just looked up at him with those pale, unwavering eyes. "The page is blank because your face will not live into the hour you demanded. I can't change that. Neither can you." The words landed like stones in my gut. The train rocked violently over another section of track, the windows rattling, the shadows in the carriage jumping. I realized I was gripping the edge of my seat so tightly my fingers ached. The clock above the door ticked over. 10:50. The carriage lurched, metal screeching under us, and Ajan grabbed the overhead rail to steady himself. His face was twisted, half anger, half something he didn't want to admit was fear. The clock above the door glowed faintly. 10:52. "You think you're clever," he spat at the old man. "You make one decent sketch, and suddenly you're some holy witness. Now you give me a blank page, and I'm supposed to believe I'm... What? Dead in 8 minutes? Pathetic." The old man didn't rise to it. He stayed seated, shawl draped heavy on his shoulders, hands folded over the pad now tucked back into his lap. His voice was steady but drained. "I don't make the page blank. The page makes itself blank. You asked for a moment you will not see. That is all." Jeremiah's breathing had quickened. He clutched his Bible like it was the only solid thing left in the carriage. "Ajan, please," he said. "Stop mocking what you don't understand." Now, the scripture warned against this for a reason. "Warned against gullibility," Ajan shot back. His laugh was brittle, sharp around the edges. You think God wrote a rule book just to save you from bad sketches? He stepped forward suddenly, closing the space between himself and the old man. The train swayed as if bracing for him. His voice rose, the words echoing in the hollow carriage. Draw me again. Right now. Another page. I don't care what your rule says. You'll draw me until it looks real. The old man's eyes finally hardened. I cannot. You will! Ajon's hand shot down, snatching at the sketch pad. The old man held it tight, knuckles white, the sound of paper straining under the grip. The pencil clattered to the floor, rolled in a lazy arc until it stopped against my shoe. The clock ticked. 10:54. I hadn't realized I was holding my breath until then. My chest hurt with the pressure of it. Jeremiah stood abruptly, putting himself between them. His voice shook, but it was loud enough to carry, This is evil, Ajon. Don't you see? You're demanding what no man is meant to have. Ajon shoved him back, not hard, but enough that Jeremiah stumbled against the seat. Stay out of it, preacher boy. His gaze snapped back to the old man. Either you're lying or you're a coward. Which is it? The old man finally rose, slow and deliberate, as if his bones had been waiting for this moment. He was taller than he'd seemed sitting down. His shawl slipped back slightly, revealing the deep lines carved into his neck and the hollow beneath his eyes. I am neither, he said quietly. But if you force me, then know this. Fate bends only once. Break it, and it will break you. The train jolted again, harder this time, as though something heavy had struck the rails beneath us. The lights flickered, dimmed, then flared back too bright, bleaching the carriage in a sickly glow. 10:56. Ajon's laugh came ragged now, almost desperate. You hear yourself? Fate bending? Do you realize how insane you sound? He lunged again, this time shoving at the old man's chest. The old man didn't resist. He staggered back against the door. His satchel swung and hit the frame with a dull thud. For a second, I thought the door would burst open and swallow him into the night. Jeremiah cried out, Ajon, stop! His voice cracked with something that wasn't just fear. It was grief in advance. The old man's eyes didn't leave Ajon. His voice was barely audible over the roar of the train, but every word landed. The hour is almost here. The clock ticked. 10:57. The carriage shook as we began to cross another bridge, the steel beams whipping past the windows in strobing flashes. The air was colder now, rushing through some unseen gap, carrying the sharp scent of river water and oil. Ajon pressed closer, fists clenched. Then I'll decide how this ends. The old man's hand went to the emergency release lever beside the door. He didn't pull it. He only rested his fingers there, like a final option. His gaze never broke from Ajon's. Decisions are only yours until the clock says otherwise, he murmured. 10:58. The next jolt nearly knocked me from my seat. The pencil at my feet rolled again, circling slowly as though something unseen was moving the floor beneath us. My throat felt raw. I wanted to shout, to stop them both. But the words died before they left. Ajon raised his hand, open-palmed, ready to shove the old man against the door again. His voice thundered in the narrow space. Then show me my future, damn you. The old man whispered back, It is already written. The lights flickered, plunging the carriage into momentary darkness. 10:59. The carriage was boiling with sound, steel screaming under us, the fluorescent lights buzzing like hornets ready to die, the air itself vibrating with the speed of the train. The clock above the door glowed mercilessly. 10:59. Ajon's hand was raised, his shadow strobing across the wall with every passing beam of the bridge. His jaw was set, his eyes alive with the kind of defiance you only see in people who believe they're untouchable. The old man didn't flinch. He kept one hand pressed to the satchel at his side, the other resting lightly, too lightly, on the emergency release lever. His face was calm, but his voice carried like thunder underwater. "The hour is here." Ajon scoffed, but the sound cracked in his throat. "Liar." He shoved forward with both hands. The world split. The train jolted so violently the seats groaned, and the door behind the old man shuddered on its hinges. The lights flickered out entirely, plunging us into blackness broken only by the slicing flashes of the bridge beams outside. In that chaos, I felt the air shift, cold wind rushing in where no wind should be, the metallic scent of water and oil overwhelming everything else. Jeremiah screamed something, maybe Ajon's name, maybe a prayer, but his voice was ripped apart by the roar of the tracks. And then it happened. The door gave way. I didn't see the exact moment, only the blur of motion, the sound of knuckles hitting metal, the hollow clang, the sudden howl of night air flooding the carriage. There was a cry, Ajon's, sharp and shocked, cut off mid-breath. For 1 second, his hand clawed the air in front of me, fingers spread wide like he was trying to grab hold of something that wasn't there. Then he was gone. The train swallowed him. The night took what was left. The old man stood in the doorway, the shawl whipping in the wind, his face carved in shadow and brief light. He didn't move to pull the lever. He didn't move at all. The clock clicked. 11 o'clock. The lights surged back to life, humming steady as if nothing had happened. The bridge beams gave way to dark countryside, silent and endless. The carriage smelled of iron and wet air, and the space where Ajon had stood was only emptiness now. Jeremiah collapsed to his knees, clutching the Bible against his chest like he was trying to hold his ribs together. His lips moved without sound. His eyes were wet and furious all at once. I couldn't breathe. My hands shook against the seat rail, my throat raw with words I couldn't get out. I stared at the doorway, expecting Ajon to claw his way back in, to laugh and call it a trick, to prove the page wrong. But the doorway was only wind. The old man turned at last. His eyes met mine, and for the first time since we'd boarded, I saw not calm, but something else. Grief, maybe, or the weary acceptance of someone who had watched this before. He stepped back from the door, slid the pad into his satchel, and pulled the shawl tighter around his shoulders. "Once," he murmured. "Only once." And then he sat down again, as if nothing had happened. The train thundered on into the dark. For a long time, none of us spoke. The train carried on indifferent, the rhythm of the wheels cruelly steady. If someone had boarded at the next stop, they might have thought it was just two tired men riding home with an old stranger dozing in the corner. But the air still held the shape of Ajon's scream. I sat frozen, staring at the doorway, my eyes watering from the cold wind that had ripped through when it opened. I kept expecting to see his hand slam back against the glass, to hear him pounding for help. But there was nothing. Only darkness rushing past, the river behind us already gone. Jeremiah was shaking, his Bible pressed against his forehead. He wasn't praying out loud anymore. His lips just moved, repeating something only he and God would ever hear. The drawing of his future, wrinkled face, weary eyes, was still tucked inside, hidden between fragile pages. The old man sat in his place as though he hadn't moved at all. His shawl draped around him, his satchel closed neatly at his feet. He wasn't smug. He wasn't triumphant. If anything, he looked smaller than before, like the weight of what had just happened pressed him down into the seat. Finally, I found my voice. It came out cracked. "You knew?" The man's pale eyes lifted to mine. He shook his head once. I only saw what the page refused to give, nothing more. Then why? My throat closed. I wanted to ask why he hadn't stopped Ajan, why he hadn't shouted, why he hadn't done something other than sit and watch the clock. But deep down, I already knew the answer. He couldn't. The rules were never his. The carriage lights hummed soft and steady, as if they hadn't blinked out at all. The clock above the door ticked to 11:03. The hands moved on. Jeremiah raised his head, his face streaked with tears, his eyes red, but burning with something else now. "You see," he whispered hoarsely to me, "this is why the verse warns us. Not because it's superstition, but because it's true. Too true. We aren't meant to ask." He held my gaze for only a second, then dropped back into silence. Finally, I turned back toward the old man and froze. He was gone. Not gone like he'd walked away. Gone like he'd never been there at all. The shawl, the satchel, the sketch pad, all of it vanished. The seat where he'd been sitting was perfectly empty, the fabric smooth, no imprint left behind. I blinked hard, convinced I'd lost track in my panic. But Jeremiah's gasp told me he saw it too. He was just there, Jeremiah stammered, pointing at the seat. His hand shook. He didn't move. He couldn't have, but he had, or something had. The air still carried his presence, faint but heavy, like the last note of a bell that wouldn't quite fade. And in that moment, I realized we had never seen him bored. We had never seen him leave. He had simply been there when we needed to be tested. The doors opened. No one boarded. The platform was empty, washed in harsh light. The train waited, sighed, and then pulled away again. I couldn't breathe right. The thought kept circling. What if I asked? What if my page stayed white too? I turned back to the door, to the cold, empty space where Ajan had stood, and I knew one thing with certainty. No one would ever believe what happened on that train. The train carried us deeper into the dark, and I never saw Ajan again. If someone offered to show you your fate, would you want to see it? Tell me below. I'm curious.